Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Del. Let's dive into this, shall we?
Just a quick reminder. Last week we were talking about like cultish relationships, how we hand our power over either in our relationships or when we join organizations. They could be spiritual organizations or self-help movements, or, as I disclosed, even in therapy. I love to disclose. I think it's just, you know what, the more that we know that we're not alone. I'm a big advocate for not having any shame. We're all doing the best we can with what we have in the moment. And I think by sharing our own vulnerabilities and when we've fallen for the, seduction of a narcissist or a cult, that when we share that, people are more likely to look at their own selves, their own behavior, their own relationships, and not feel so alone and not ashamed. And they're more likely to do what we're talking about today, which is advocate for themselves. So
Right. But also the fact is that you're sharing it from a place where you've done the work so that when you do share it, it doesn't open up wounds and it doesn't let people like leverage it against you. You're clean on it, which is great. And that's the thing. Hopefully anybody who goes through this work gets to the place where they can share what happened as just data points versus, um, wounds and scars they're carrying.
yeah,
So you're sharing it so clearly that you've done the work.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I've met those skeletons in my closet. They're all dancing out into the house. So
Halloween.
we talked this week about that self-abdicating, where it comes from, and you join in here, Barry. But I do think, besides having, say, a dysfunctional childhood, which certainly contributes to it for sure, but I think society as well. We are raised as little girls to be nurturing and caretakers, and don't be selfish and put other people's needs first more than men are. I really
And,
think, yeah. So talk
and
about.
Well, the thing is that what came for me was because, and I've shared this before on the broadcast, in the podcast about when I'm in my teen years, I was bullied at high school. And so up to that point, there was this whole thing about like being a man. Like the boys had to be strong and to be tough so that we take care of the women, we could be the protectors. Being bullied threw that into a tailspin for me because it took me out of the role of being a tough guy. Because the reason when I got bullied, I didn't stand up to be a tough guy to the boys around me. So they said, "Oh, he's an easy victim." So they kept adding on to the layers. And I'm not saying bully's a good idea by any means, but it gave me, in a sense, a shift of perspectives that I didn't see being tough as being good. Because up to that point, I think for most men, most boys growing up to be men, there was a positivity to being tough that made us like, when you're a man, you're really strong, you're tough, you're a good guy, sort of thing. There's all these labels and assumptions about us, same as the women had labels too. But sometimes things happen to us on the road. And I know for myself, with that certainly that bullying experience and a couple other things too in my teen years, that I won't say give me pause, but gave me a wider view of what was going on. So that the rules that I was being taught didn't fit me anymore. And that was actually my escaping away from the indoctrination I was probably going through.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. I know in my family environment, it was basically. I mean, my mother was wonderful in many ways. She definitely, she was such a complex human being, I have to say. She was a narcissist, she was codependent, she was a caretaker, and all of these things. But she definitely, in many ways, she taught me to be a caretaker, to really, really take into consideration other people's feelings.
Right.
But it went too far. It was the sort of you don't sort of stand up for yourself. It's always be magnanimous, let them have it, it's fine. And also my school, I went to a convent, and it was the same thing. It was, we were shamed if we were an opportunist. I remember there was a science lesson once where they had, we were all taught by nuns, and there was all these, I think I was probably about 11 years old, and I was going to be using one of those, sort of, what do they call those things?
Microscope.
A microscope, but there was a particular one anyway. And we all had to run up to the front desk and choose a flower that we were going to look at under the microscope.
Yeah.
And I remember I was one of the first to the desk. I certainly didn't elbow anybody or push anybody out the way. But
Very
I was excited
quick.
to get to use this microscope. And I remember the nun shaming me into the, oh, so you wanted to get the best, sample, the best flower. Well, then in that case, you get to the back of the line and you will take the one that nobody else wants. And that was a constant, the opportunity to constantly shame you for having
Right.
any sense of self. And you touched on this last week. It was fascinating. You were talking about religion and about mass religion, and it really was. I remember standing up to the sort of Sister Dolores and saying something once, and she said, I think it was something like, "Why are you so mean?" or something, and she said, "Because we're trying to crush you to rebuild you in God's eye."
Which is cult language.
Exactly, cult language. So there you
Right.
go. Exactly. And so besides having a mother that wouldn't allow me to have a self, to express my needs and wants and my hurts, I had
Yeah.
to, always think of her. Couldn't express that home was crazy, literally. I had to be very aware of everybody else's feelings, not hurt anybody's feelings, not say what I wanted. And then to have that environment that I grew up in school as well, on top of that, it's no surprise that I would become the poster child for codependency and for putting myself second to
Right.
everybody else's needs.
It's what comes up for a moment is that I'm almost amazed that we survive based on what we get raised through sometimes.
No.
The thing is that so many of us are brought, and we talked about this before too, about generational patterns, that we do learn our ways of relating and loving and connecting and being loved, oftentimes without any true awareness of it, it's unconscious, through the way parents teach us or parent teaches us. So recognizing that, first of all, just want to make sure we get this point in clear, that if you're feeling that after listening to our talk, especially last week and this week, that somehow you did something wrong or that you should know better, that's a lie. Because the bottom line is, for I think it's true for everybody, if generally when we know better, we do better. So if you didn't know, there's no way you could have done better. So you did what you did with what you knew at the time. And this understanding that we didn't do this intentionally, but we learned by the way we were raised, not to abdicate our role, but also means that we don't blame ourselves for doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that leads us to the next point, which is, as I was saying, to start to put or to be even, I remember sitting in therapy and my therapist saying to me once when I was going through my divorce, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want everybody to be happy. I just want my kids to be happy. I want my ex to be happy. I just want," and I truly could not answer the question, what do I want? I,
Right.
I just didn't, because I was so used to having put other people's needs ahead of my own. It didn't even come on my radar. What do I want? And and the second I would start to think of myself, I would have that internal negative chatter of, "You're selfish. Who do you think you are?" I have an Australian teacher. She calls it the big poppy syndrome, the tall poppy syndrome. It's like, oh God forbid you should be any taller or better than anybody else. Cut yourself off at the kneecaps. And yeah, my mum used to say to me all the time, like, sort of, "Oh, pride comes before a fall, and the higher you go, the deeper the fall," or all these things of keeping yourself small, so that you're not going to offend other people, or you're not going to have this massive collapse at the end if you don't get what you want.
Right.
Cultural as well. It's cultural and familial that we go through these things.
Well, one of the things I want to add to this, and I'm trying to remember if we talked about this in the previous episode or not. I think we did. It's blur. But this thing about, oftentimes we say yes to other people and do things for other people when we abandon ourselves. This, in a way, is a sideline. So it ties into how we keep agreement to ourselves. oftentimes, and part of this abandoning ourselves really is when we overcommit to other things and we say yes to everything out there, because we want to be approved of, we want to be accepted, we want to be loved,
Hmm.
rather than saying no to things because we feel like we'd be left out if we don't do that. So oftentimes we do abandon ourselves by having this rule, or I'm going to say it's a yearning, but it's a rule to make sure that we keep other people happy. That sort of disowning of our own, responsibility. The funny thing about agreements is that every agreement we make is with us because we're agreeing to do something. So recognizing that we actually like ourselves and we think we're abandoning ourselves. I mean, not to be callous about it, but it's like we forget that we actually are still in charge.
Yeah,
That's
I
the thing I
think,
want to get.
yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, it's quite primal that
Yeah,
we for obviously millenniums the tribe survives, the individual doesn't survive. So we have that tribe mentality where we try and keep the peace, we try and keep people around us, we are people pleasers to keep ourselves safe, to keep our
yeah,
group, to not be abandoned by the group or rejected by the group. But it's so interesting, again, going back to what I just said. It's like, you know a strong, assertive male in the group is revered and acknowledged and rewarded. But
right.
to have a bitchy, demanding female in the group might not be received so well. And again, that is cultural. Why is the male encouraged to be the alpha, to take what they want, to be assertive, to be a go getter, to be have goals and achieve, and that's revered. And then
Yeah,
for women, it's like, no, your role is to be passive, is to be nurturing, is to keep the peace. And I'm not saying, I mean, I think some of those qualities are fabulous, but I think that, as we've talked about before with the divine feminine and the divine masculine, that all of those qualities are within all of us. So we
yes,
can play with that. We can be the sort of assertive, divine masculine within the feminine, and vice versa. A man that identifies as being male can have wonderful qualities of what we
absolutely.
see as more the divine feminine, as in the nurturing and in the emotional container and things like that. But what I also wanted to say is, it's a muscle that needs exercising. We go
Oh,
through a period of time of feeling like hell. We feel yucky inside when we've been more assertive than we're used to being, or put our
well,
needs ahead of others.
there was something else that came up. Excuse me. There was something else that came up when you said that, because the feeling of making it conscious, that sent like to know about how we sort of default to certain ways of being, and oftentimes like we said earlier about making agreements and saying we'll do things, we don't make ourselves aware of what we're saying and doing.
Mhm.
And part of this journey and this whole thing you're talking about, in a way, the abandonment of self, is because we are not being conscious of what we're doing. And so it's that there's that almost the point of view where we need to be like witnessing ourselves and being our own observer. When we say yes to something, part of us we check in is like, is that what I really want to do? Because we don't necessarily sometimes second guess, which in this case could be a good thing, second guess,
Mhm.
because we may be in such a reflexive action of doing things and being a certain way that we're not even conscious of it. So
Mhm.
bringing ourselves conscious to what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing can give us choice, because then we know, oh, hang on a second, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I mean, I enjoy. I'm a very, very nurturing person. I do it. I love to give, and I love to nurture, and I love to be of service. That's just is part of my makeup. But I've also very much developed that side of myself, like the part of me that didn't have any real confidence in myself. Part of my saying yes wasn't just to be, you know, protected within the group, to be the
right,
people pleaser. It was also to get that external validation. Now, I don't need external validation anymore. I mean, it's nice. It's nice to have a compliment, but I don't need it. I used to need it. I was so unaware of who I was when I was younger that I was like, like I said last week, I was completely very easily manipulated and lured in because I was
absolutely.
a sucker for outside validation because I didn't get the validation growing up. I didn't, when you're abandoned by one of your parents, that is such a wound, and you then end up continuing rather that self abandonment once you've made a decision that you were abandoned because you weren't good enough, and then it just perpetuates until, as you said, until you become conscious and aware.
Absolutely. And beyond that, it's kind of the thing where we oftentimes think that we can't fill ourselves up. We need to get someone else to fill us up first, like whether it's approval or validation or anything else. We forget we can do it to ourselves, or for ourselves rather. And that's a trap we fall into because society doesn't teach us this, of course. I mean, religion doesn't teach it either. We keep having to put our needs outside ourselves to be filled up by somebody else, something else, by things we need to do for other people, because of the rules that we have been convinced by to live by. So we don't choose to fill our own battery up first, so to speak. We have to keep getting fed by other people. And that becomes this, unfortunately, very codependent, as I said before, way of being, because we can't rely on ourselves as much. We have to rely on somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is part of that feeling good about yourself. I know that I used to get, it wasn't even so much that they would verbally validate me, but if I could help somebody, I immediately felt better about myself. So I was on that track of, I remember again, my therapist should be famous. I'm always quoting him, but I remember him saying to me one day, he said, Del, it's like you're walking past like a manhole and there's a piece of string hanging out and there's a voice in the manhole saying, hey, grab the end of the rope, pull me out of here, I need help. And I would stop at every damn manhole and just grab the end of that rope and get pulled into the hole because I again, I didn't think I had a choice. I had been trained that you hear somebody calling and asking for help, you see the end of a rope, you pick it up regardless of if you're in a hurry, you're going somewhere else, you don't have time, don't have the resources, don't have the bandwidth, whatever it is, you abandon yourself and you pick up that rope and you take care of somebody else. And some of us do that unconsciously again, not realizing that some of those people that are down the manhole, there's a ladder they can actually climb out. They don't look around them to see what resources they have at hand for them to help themselves. So
Right.
we think that we're helping other people by constantly picking up that end of that rope and trying to help somebody out of a hole, when sometimes the best thing to do is to just say, hey, there's some steps next to you, feel in the dark, there is a way out, trust me, there's a way out, you will find it, I believe in you, I believe in you so much that you will find your way out of that hole. You don't need me to abandon myself to take care of you.
Well, there's two things from that. One of which, this leads into the conversation about sympathy versus empathy. And just to use the same thing today with the rope, but a different way to talk about it is, you know, sympathy. You see somebody fall down a hole, and you throw in a rope and jump in after it to be with them. It's almost like commiseration. Empathy is somebody falls down a hole, you come up with a rope and you lower it down and you pull them out, but you stand up on the high ground to do it. That's kind of the difference energetically. But the thing I want to get to is that, well, actually, in the side, one more sidebar, they keep showing up, is we're not talking about you don't give a service in other places and be kind to other people. I'm not talking about that at all. But it's the fact that we become slaves to fixing other people's problems.
Mhm.
Because, and we talked about this before, maybe not, but sometimes our problems are our biggest teachers, and we become much more empowered when we figure out the problem and resolve it, whether it's a romantic one, a relationship one, family one, whatever it is. We become empowered. So if someone took it away from us, we wouldn't learn. Yeah, the wiring we have that we have to fix other people's problems means they don't get to learn
Mhm.
because we took it away from them. So in some ways, the gift we give somebody to be more empowered because they figured it out, like saying, look, there's a ladder there, you climb this out yourself. They discover they've got more power than they realized they had. So by not doing it, we become better helping other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing I often think we do is, I always, when I do my classes, I teach people is that, this is my little glass heart here for the people that
Yes.
aren't on YouTube. It's a glass heart. And often what we do, it's almost like hot potato. It's like, here's my heart, take care of it. And then we we guard over them and going, hang on a minute, you're not taking care of that. That's not the way my heart needs to be taken care of. It's like, and again, and we do it, and then they do it back to us. It's like, here, take mine. And again, it's like, that's not that we're not there for each other. It's not that we're not compassionate and we're not loving and we're not considerate. But I think what we're really pointing to is to be to have to distinguish, to have consciousness, awareness around this, to have it not be just something that's rote and we end up becoming, critical, or our bodies. Where I always say resentment is your body's way of saying you gave more than you could afford to give, and
Yeah.
it
Funny.
really is. It's a wake up call. It's like, oh, if I'm in resentment, I've been on automatic pilot, thinking I didn't have a choice, thinking I had to say yes when I didn't want to. And now I'm pissed off. But you're not pissed off with the other person, you're pissed off with yourself. Because as I said, we're the ones that are in charge of our hearts, our life force, and how much we give away and at what cost. And so it's really just about being conscious and knowing that it's okay to say no.
That's the biggest lesson we could teach right now.
Yeah.
Almost. But
All
that's the
right.
thing. Well, that's one of the things I want to touch on, is that we are so trained to say yes. And that ability to say no against something else and we can say yes to ourselves, which is really what it's about, is a gift we rarely give ourselves. And so for many people, I believe, in the world, their stress levels will come down if they said no to more things. One, because there's less things to keep track of out there, but secondly, because it's an affirmative for themselves to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to give all the time at work and be burnt out when you come home, so you're not even functional at home when you come home to your family.
Yeah.
It's learning that you have to this whole thing about body self-abandonment really is creating healthier boundaries.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Exactly. I was just about to bring that up.
exactly, yeah, it's the thing. Boundaries is a key thing because so many people don't realize that their boundaries have been trampled so many times, especially when they're young with kids with their families. But as an adult, we oftentimes don't know how to establish healthy boundaries because we don't want to learn how to say no out of respect, not out of againstness, but also we don't choose consciously what we say yes to. And that's such a difference. So it's understanding those things is so key. So I want to make sure that people get that it's healthy to say no,
Yeah.
to have a clean understanding, because then you don't abandon yourself.
Exactly. And then as we're talking about boundaries, I think this is really important too. When we get healthier and we do start setting up boundaries with our family, with our friends, um, we are going to encounter pushback, especially if somebody has
Oh,
used to us being a certain way all our life and they're used to being able to sort of pull our strings and get what they want from us. There is going to be, and often what happens then is there can be some shaming. That person will shame you. Oh, you've changed. Oh,
yeah.
you've become so selfish. And I preferred you were the way you were before. And there can be all of these. And, and the thing is to actually, this is another one I had to learn, to take it as a compliment. It means that
Oh,
it means that
okay.
you're growing. It
Yeah,
means you're growing. And it just means that the person that was taking advantage of you is not very happy with you. They want you to go back to the old way of being where they were getting more of the goodies out of the relationship than you were. So it
absolutely.
actually is good feedback. If somebody is upset with you for saying no in a very loving, polite way, you don't have to blow somebody out the water. You can simply say, I'd love to, but I really can't, or I've decided I'm going to do this instead, or whatever it is. But to be able to tolerate somebody else trying to shame you back into an old submissive role where
Right.
they were getting all their needs met.
That is, oh, wow. It's the thing that we have to learn to really, again, I said this a little earlier on about how we get to really have a good look in the mirror to see ourselves and recognize that one, we're worth it, but two, we are whole as we are. So when we do say no, when we do elevate ourselves and we create healthier boundaries, that pushback, just as you said, and I love the way you put it, becomes a positive reflection that we go, yes, I have changed. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. I know it's so funny. But it's like like I said, it's a muscle. It's like going to the gym. When you first start working out in an area that you haven't worked out before, your biceps or whatever, your triceps, and it's going to hurt at first. It's going to be sore. It's not used to it, but we don't stop. We just know that that's part of getting healthier and stronger, is to just keep going and allow the other person the space to have their feelings. We don't have to control their reaction to make ourselves feel better. We're
Absolutely.
strong enough to tolerate disapproval.
Yep. That's the thing, is that it's there's the Eleanor Roosevelt quote about, like, what you think of me is none of my business. It is that level of understanding that other people's feelings we don't have to worry about as much. We may have been trained that way as a kid by being raised in families where we get told we're responsible for how somebody else feels. But when we start to take back the power, take back the reminder, or just simply say, you know what, these feelings are mine, I take care of them. Your feelings are yours, you take care of those.
Yeah.
That distinction, I mean, for some people, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
But it's such a to understand
It
that.
just reminded me when I
Of course,
when I first arrived here, I was like 21, I think 21. And at the time, maybe I was about 23 at the time, I was working on a movie. And I remember the Teamster, his name was Pat Ballou, and he gave me a book. And it was, I mean, you just quoted the title. You said it was Eleanor Roosevelt. It was written by Terry Cole Whitaker, and the title
oh
was
yeah,
"What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." And I
yeah,
remember he gave me this book, and I looked at him and I said, "That is the most stupid title I've ever heard. What you think of me? Of course, it's my business." You know,
right.
because I had been, obviously, he saw how well trained I was to be a people pleaser.
What
And
a gifty.
I know. But it made me laugh how my initial reaction was like, "That is so wrong."
It's such an interest. I guess what I'm lucky in some of the books that crossed my paths over the years. The first book that ever changed, that I know changed my life when I was probably in my teens, was Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. And
Lovely.
that was my favorite. I mean, I read the book like 2 times in like the first 2 hours I had it, and it was in tears, and it was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But recognizing that what he did, the not damn, not Richard Bach, but what Jonathan did was to focus on what he wanted, not what not what the flock wanted.
Hmm.
And that differentiation was maybe the first sign I ever got. I'm looking back and just comparing with the rest of my wife, where it's possible to choose to be outside the flock.
Yeah.
My life in a lot of ways, and I've been outside the norm because I've been much of an observer. And I think that book was probably what the first wake up call I had for that. So yeah, those books we read early on can be very transformational.
Hmm. Yeah, that was a beautiful one, and it's true. I mean, like when I was said earlier about that, it's primal that we have this need to belong. That's just, I'm talking about hundreds and thousands of years ago, where we really were in danger of the saber-toothed tiger, and we were safer when we were a village or a clan. And we know better now. We know that that's not necessary. It's lovely to be in community. It's lovely to have friends and family and everything like that. But we don't need to lose ourselves to maintain that. We can find healthier people to flock with, as you said. We can be our individual selves. We can be the Jonathan Livingston seagulls and fly off on our own sometimes and meet other flocks and wander around from flock to flock.
And it's also in a way that belonging, which is a primal thing, absolutely. But oftentimes we haven't made it conscious or intentional.
Hmm.
So to make the community you choose something you choose, not just something you fall into, can be one of the biggest changes you can make in your life to be much more whole and much more self-supportive.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a good one again. I love having our weekly chats, Barry.
They're getting deeper and deeper. I love it.
All right, lovely. Well, I think
Right.
that's it for today. So thank you, everybody, again. Please join us next week. We're not sure what we're going to talk about, but I got some
Well,
inklings.
good. Of course, it'll be fun.
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.
Take care of yourselves. Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well, so go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.